that there are some people who have registered from Saudi Arabia. For them, it is good morning. And for those who are attending from India, it is good afternoon. So let me start with showing you two pictures. Picture number one. When you look at this picture, maybe some of you will be able to identify who is this person in this picture. But I'm sure maybe 80% may not know. Out of these many participants, few of you will be able to recognize him. But when I show the second picture, I'm sure all of you will be able to identify this individual as Albert Einstein. The other person shown in the picture is the father of Albert Einstein, Hermann Einstein. Hermann Einstein, he was a salesman by profession. He was then owning an electrical company. Whereas when you look at Albert Einstein, his own son, he is a genius, a physicist. So here, the genes, what he transferred into his son, it doesn't mean that everyone will become a genius, right? Because his father was not a genius, but his son became a genius, a world-famous scientist. So it is something that it is not only related to the genes, the environment or the nature in which the individual is grown. That is also a very important aspect. Let me ask you this question. Have you ever wondered why you are the way you are? Is it because of your genes, or is it because of the way you were raised? This is the question of debate. All these started with the concept of nature versus nurture. This particular topic or this particular term, nature versus nurture, was coined by Sir Francis Galton. He was a psychologist in the year 1869, long back. After that, there was a lot of debate on this particular topic. One group of scientists started saying that your behavior is a reflection of your gene, whereas other group started with saying that it is the environment in which you're growing that makes that behavior. So today, we will just try to analyze some of these aspects of nature versus nurture, and hopefully you will get a take-home message after this webinar. That is why I was so excited to present to you all about this particular topic. There is also a misconception in psychology. When you say nature, it doesn't mean environment, right? If you, this is something, because normally when we say I am a nature lover, that means you love the nature or the environment, that kind of thing. But in here, in psychology, we don't use this nature term in terms of environment. But what is that? Nature here is referring to the genetic inheritance, the genes, what you get from your parents. The blueprint, what you get from your parents, that is referred to as genetics in this psychological terms. If you compare with nurture, it is the influence of the external factors after the conception. So the individual will be growing in a, if it is after a conceived stage, if you're growing as an embryo, there are several influences. The mother can go through several influences. The mother can be stressed or any other influence, the influence of alcohol, influence of smoking. So many things might be, or the other emotional matters. Everything might influence the developing baby, and then it might cause changes in the behavior in the later stages of life. So today we are discussing about the interlink between the nature and the nurture. Nature. So here it is referred to the set of genes, what it is received from the parents, as which is serving as a blueprint, which is reflecting the behavior. Some of the examples like eye color, hair color, dimples on the cheeks. So these things are some of the inherited disorders like sickle cell anemia, Huntington's disease. These kind of things are purely genetic in origin, right? So if you have a parent with one of these disorder, it is sure that you are going to get it. So this is about the nature, whereas nurture is the behavior which is influenced as a result of the environment in which the individual is raised. So this might be the early childhood experiences where the person is going through, social relationships where he is having, lifestyle. Lifestyle matters a lot in nurturing your genes, nurturing your behavior. Nutrition, the food we take, it has a lot of, so we will come to each of these points in the later stages. Exercise, if you're an exercising individual, that also can change the kind of gene expression what is seen. Smoking, yes, that is also an important cause, and also stress. So these are some of the major points which we will be trying to have an overview on or try to relate. So let us go one by one. So if you look at where you are, the phenotypic expression, what you have in your behavior is a result of genes, what you acquire from your parents, and also the influence of the environment. So it is a combination of both, and it will be interlinked, and you are in the center, right? So that is why you will be put here as the phenotypic expression will be a combination or a result of both of this. So your genes, when it interact with the environment, or the environment when it interacts, there is a change which is happening, and it is reflecting as a phenotypic behavior what is seen in the individual. This can be explained in terms of epigenetics. Epi means above genetics. Right? So this was a branch of science which was developed in the later stages, where the genes interact with the environment and the gene expressions is reflected in the individual. This term, epigenetics, was coined by Kumar, and this particular biologist, he was an embryologist and geneticist, and it was in the year 1942. It was from University of Cambridge. He is the one who pioneered or coined this particular term of epigenetics. Now, a lot of literatures are there on epigenetic studies. So what is epigenetics? So here, the experience, what the individual is going through, can manipulate the gene expression. So in this left-hand side, in this picture, you can see that various substances like the diet the individual take, the drugs the individual is taking, or the chemical substances to which the individual is exposed, all these things can cause a manipulation in the gene expression. The important thing is that most of these things are heritable changes without changing the DNA sequence. The DNA sequence is not changing, but the gene expressions is changed, and this is heritable. And it is simple language. It is the change in the phenotype without changing the genotype. So here comes the influence of the environment or the nurture. And the major mechanisms they mentioned is DNA methylation and histone modification. So if you just look at the DNA double helix with the nitrogen bases, adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, which is linked together with hydrogen bond. Methyl groups, when a methyl group go and attach to the cytosine bases, it will prevent the attachment of this particular enzyme, RNA polymerase. So RNA polymerase, if it is not able to come and link with this, what will happen is that particular part of the gene will not be expressed, and that gene is silenced. That is called as a gene silencing. So gene silencing will take place when there is a methylation which is taking place. DNA methylation is one of the important causes for that. And similarly, histone modification is also one of the things which is mentioned. So here, I'm giving you an example in a mice, which is called as a gouty mice. A gouty gene, it's a kind of a normal gene, which is it is seen in the human, which determines the color of your skin. Right? It will be determining the melanin pigmentation, around and distribution of the melanin over the skin. So if this particular gene is normal, your skin coloration will be normal. Similarly, in the case of animals, like in cats, in the case of rodents, you can see the coat color. The usual coat color can be a brown color in the rats. But if you have a mutation in this particular gene, now here, this rat, this work was done by Waterland and Gentle in the year 2003. And agouti mice with a genetic mutation in the agouti gene, they are very unhealthy. If you look at the characteristic color, you can see it is yellow in color. It is not brown. Yellow in color, they are obese, they have heart defects and the cardiovascular defects, they have diabetes, so many complications. They are very unhealthy. So when this gives rise to offsprings, the offsprings also will be usually unhealthy. But these researchers have done an amazing study by giving or feeding them with diet that are rich in methyl groups, right? So the diet which are rich in methyl, like folic acid, those kind of things, they are rich in methyl groups. So when the diets with rich in methyl groups were fed to these rats, they observed that there was a gene silencing which has happened in this particular mutated gene, and this rat started delivering the pups which are absolutely normal with coat color normal, right? So this is a kind of an experiment which shows that it is not only the genes but also the nurture also matters. So here, what is the nurture? It is the diet, the simple diet. That was the nurturing which is done, and it, without changing the DNA sequencing, it has changed the genetic expression of the particular individual. So here you can see that change. Similarly, the same kind of thing is also replicated in the case of human beings also. For example, epigenetics and tobacco or e-vapor exposure. This was a very recent study which was done last year by one of the groups. You can see it was published in Clinical Epigenetics. It's a very good journal with more than 5 impact factors. And in this particular journal, in this review, they just mentions that maternal use of tobacco, cigarettes, and e-cigarettes and exposure to environmental tobacco smoke induces epigenetic changes in the offspring. So in the offsprings, the mother is using it, but the changes are seen in the offspring. And they have shown that this changes is also inherited, right? It is inherited. So it might, what changes they are seeing? They might be seeing some of the pathological condition associated with the respiratory system when there is smoking. So this is inherited to the other generations as well, which is independent of the exposure. So other generations are not using cigarette or anything, but it is seen. So this is one of the beauty of epigenetics. So that means environment is having a direct influence on changing the gene expression. So that is what I would like to say in this aspect. So where you are in the center, which is influenced by the genes, the environment, and also the epigenetics comes into picture. So all these things, so you are a result of everything. So we cannot always blame only on the genes. We need to think of the environment in which we are living, the choices we are taking in terms of food and other things. So let us see a kind of identical twins. What about identical twins, a monozygotic twins who are brought up in 2 different environments? There is interesting studies. If you just Google it, you will get hundreds of studies. There are also many countries, they have the Twin Research Center. Dr. Nancy Siegel from California University, she is one of the pioneers in working in this particular field. Under the twin study, they have a twin study center. Several types of twins, identical monozygotic twins or dizygotic twins, they have done a lot of studies in this. And in the year 2015, there was a journal article which came up in Nature Genetics. And this was done, sampling was done in several samples. And they came out with the result saying that nature is contributing to 49% in the personality changes, the behavior, and 51% is by the nurture. So it is almost like equal contribution. So we cannot neglect the influence of nurturing. Nurturing is very important. So this is one article which was published in 2014 from one of the, see, this is the Nancy Siegel's article. So here you can see that born in Korea, adopted apart. So here, two identical twins, which are the monozygotic twins. One was brought up in United States, another one in the France. And they saw some of the striking similarities and the striking differences. Striking similarities in the sense that some of the choices, what they make, that is something which is unique. They don't know each other at the age. So there is another one more example here. In the case of two twins like Jim Lewis and Jim Springer, they were identical twins, but at the age of 4 weeks, they were apart and they started growing separately in two different places. But they united at the age of 39. Now here, they found some common similarities. Now, both of them had tension headaches. Whenever they are tense, they started getting tension headaches. They were prone for nail biting behavior. So they never communicated before. They are communicating only after 39 years. But this kind of innate behavior, what is showing is purely in their genes, right? And they smoke the same brand cigarettes. And also they said that they used to visit the same beach in Florida for their vacations. Nobody told them to go there, but it's a kind of innate behavior what they are having. It is a reflection of their genes. So gene is very important to show certain behavior. But when these kind of twins, according to her studies, Dr. Nancy's studies, they also studied so many other people. There was twin sisters. When they came together after so many years, they saw that when they looked at the fingers, each one was wearing rings in all the 5 fingers. Well, how that is possible? It's a kind of choice, but that kind of choice, what an individual is making, it is also having a genetic origin in it, right? So this kind of things, they are not communicating each other, but they have shown these kind of things. It is very interesting to see these kind of studies. A lot of videos are also available in YouTube. If you Google it, it is very interesting to learn about the twin study. But they have certain differences because they have grown in 2 different environments. When you see some of the things, their job satisfaction or the stress levels to which they can adapt. So these kind of things matters because they are grown up in 2 different environments. Some individuals, when they are growing in a particular environment, it might be very stressful. Some individuals, it also depends upon interaction, social behaviors with the individual. So all these things matters. So here, there was also a Minnesota study which was done. They say that initially that the genetics is playing an important or a predominant role or a major role. But then they also found out that environment has a very good influence when twins were raised apart, but not when they were raised together. So that is one of the findings. So nature has an equal role. Nature and nurture has an equal role in developing the behavior of the individual. What about stress responses? We have seen several people who are our colleagues working along with us. As a student, when you are studying your friends, if you ask your friends stress level might be different from yours, right? So in the office, when you see, some individuals might be very calm, organized, and they might be focused in their work. And some individuals might be extremely stressful. So the stress levels to which the individuals can take up, this also has an influence on the environment. This is very important. Probably the cool guy who is there shown in the picture, he might be having an environment which is fostering that kind of behavior. His counterparts or the individuals with he is interacting, the environment which he is working, everything matters. So this also has a very important role in the behavior. In 2020, there was also one article which was editorial, which is very interesting, which is on the depression, whether nature and nurture has an important role. And they came with the conclusion saying that the results demonstrate the strong impact of rearing environment on the risk of major depression and support the importance of intervention efforts to improve the rearing environment in high-risk families. This very often we see in many of the individuals. Some kids, if they are not grown in a proper environment, if the family situation is not proper, if their parents are not in good terms, they are fighting every time, or they might have got divorced, any of these things, they might definitely affect the behavior of the child, and sometimes they go into a state of depression. So nurturing, so this kind of influence of the nurture, it will definitely change the gene expression. Probably this epigenetic change, which will be silencing a particular type of gene which is usually expressed. There are so many evidences which can be found out from the animal studies as well. We can see one of the interesting study, epigenetic programming by maternal behavior. This Weaver et al., who published in Nature Neuroscience, again, one of the high impact journals. So here, their work was like this. When a pup is born, which is raised by a high nurturing mother. Now in the animals or in the rodents, how you know that it is high nurturing? High nurturing is indicated by the amount by which the mother licks the baby. Here it is not the baby, it is the pups, right? So it will be licking the pup so that it will be nurtured, it will be feeling good when it is getting the licks from its mother rat. Now in the case of the other hand, you can see here the pups which are raised by an anxious, low nurturing mother, and they will be growing into an anxious pup. So this is also an influence of the maternal behavior on the pups which is produced and how they reflect their behavior in the later stages of life. So this was a very interesting experiment. So they had two groups of rats. One group, which we can call it as a high licker mom. The left hand side, you can see a high licker mom, which is continuously licking its pup. Whereas on the right hand side, you can see a low licker mom, which is always sleeping, very lazy. It is not licking its pup. And the pup is so much disappointed and depressed because it is not being given any attention. It will be lying down in one side of the cage and the mother is lying down in the other side. No interaction at all. They're always lazy. This kind of behavior will be having a reflection in its behavior when this pup becomes an adult. And what the studies have shown that when the next generation was produced, the one which was receiving the lickings, they developed into a mom which are actually high licker mom. It became high licker mom because they are brought up in that kind of setup where its mother was licking it continuously, right? So they will also do the same thing with their own pups. So this was one of the findings. Whereas a low licker mom, that particular pup from the low licker mom, when it grow up and when it give rise to its offsprings, that will turn into the similar situation, right? No interest at all, a low licker one. So this is a kind of a genetic thing which is happening. Now what the scientists did, the scientists replaced the high licker mom pup to a low licker mom pup. So this was replaced to two different places. So you can see that now here, this particular pup is coming from a low licker mom, and here the high licker mom goes to a low licker. Now let us see. Definitely when the pup it receives, now this mother is, of course, it is a high licker mother. It will start licking this particular pup. It will be licking. So it will feel happy because so far it was not receiving any kind of licking. So the nurturing part was lacking in it. Now it started receiving that nurturing because it is being continuously licked by its mother. Whereas in the other case, we can see that this pup is heartbroken because it was not receiving any licking. It was very depressed because all this while it was receiving the lickings from the other mother, but here this mother is always sleeping. It's very lazy, right? So when they took up the next generation, what they saw is the one which received the licking, they started licking. So they changed its behavior. So the genetic behavior, if you look at it, it should be, ideally, it should be a low liquor one. But here it became a high liquor one. And here it became a low liquor one. So here, now from this experiments, what you can conclude. So it is not only the genes what is showing or reflecting the expression, it is the nurturing is also an important role which reflects the behavior of the individual. Right? So this is one of the groundbreaking research which was done by the Weaver et al. In 2007. And after that, so many studies have been published in the literature if you go through. One of the important paradigm is the environmental enrichment, which was described by Donald Hebb in 1947. If you look at this particular picture, it is quite interesting. You can see that there are so many items which is there in this particular picture. Many rats are put together in a huge area, and there is running walls, tunnels, ladders, some playing balls, so many things, music, so many things are there. It's a complete enriched environment. So in this kind of environment, the brain will have a physical and it's a kind of stimulation of the brain will be happening due to the surrounding nature. So it will be providing a cognitive, visual, somatosensory and motor stimulation. Why motor stimulation? Because it is moving around, running around the ladders, going around the tunnels. So there is a motor stimulation, a kind of exercise is happening every time. Now they interact socially. If one rat alone is put in one cage, it doesn't have any social interaction. But 5 rats or 6 rats together in one particular cage, it's a big area. It can run around, play around. So it literally, it's like a rat's version of a Disney world, right? When you take the kids to the Disney world, they are so fascinated with the things, rides there. So it's like that for the rat. They are so happy to be in this kind of environment. Rat's version of, so here you can see 2 different settings. One is a standard environment, the standard housing, which is a normal, small sized area where you put 3 rats. There is nothing in that. You will be giving only the food and water to these animals. But you can see in the right hand side, it is a huge area where you have food, water, every other things to explore, running wheels, ladders, and many rats will be put together. So they will be playing each other. The rats like to play each other. It's like they are like kids, right? When you have small kids, you have seen that when you bring a kid to another house, they will be playing each other, right? So that kind of thing is happening. But when you dissect out the brain and look at the anatomy of the brain, you can see that there are dendritic changes which is happening. You can see that in the standard housing, this is the situation. Whereas in the dendrites, there is a more dendritic arborization, branching points, everything is improved in a rat brain, which is housed in an enriched environment. Also the dendritic spines, the number of spines, everything increases in the rats, which is in the enriched environment. So this shows that the environment is having a very good influence on the brain morphology and the behavior of the animal. Even these rats, when they were taken into different like experiments, it showed improvement. Now, this particular person is one of the pioneers who worked in this field, Dr. Marian Diamond from University of California, Berkeley. And she was the one who worked intensive studies in the brain from Professor Einstein. Once Einstein was dead, his brain was studied, and now you know that he was a genius because there are several differences in his brain and things like that. It was one of the scientists who studied was Marian Diamond, and she passed away in 2017. And I was fortunate that during my PhD, I had some interaction through emails. She had sent me a couple of papers of her research because she was also doing in enriched environment. My topic was also related to that. So it was very useful, and I thank her for that. And another researcher, Dr. Kemperman from Germany, he published a paper. This was a groundbreaking research which published in Nature in the year 1997. More hippocampal neurons in adult mice living in an enriched environment. They're absolutely normal mice. When you just put a normal mice into an enriched environment, and later when they dissect out the brain, they saw that the hippocampal neurons, they have more neurons, more neurogenesis has occurred in their brains. So this is one of the findings which was done. So he has done a lot of studies on that, environmental enrichment, new neurons, neurobiology of individuals. So ultimately, all these things will reflect in their behavior in terms of cognition. What about childhood abuse? Childhood abuse is one of the factors usually the psychologists and the psychiatrists will be talking or treating on. So this kind of aspect, so they have a serious impact on the hippocampal volume. The imaging studies have shown that the hippocampal volume is reduced in such kind of cases. The childhood malnourishment is associated with reduced volume of the hippocampal subfield. Also, there might be kind of short-term memory loss and things like that. They might also go into a stage of depression because hippocampus is one of the area which is having a large amount of glucocorticoid receptors in it, and it is involved in the stress regulation. So it is one of the things which balances the stress of the brain. So if you don't have a good hippocampus, this individual will not be able to cope up with stress. The hippocampus will falter, and then it will be having its own impact like memory loss and all associated changes will happen. Effects of isolation stress. Now, many of the individuals throughout the world is going through this situation because of COVID-19. Many of the people are isolated. Some are alone at home. They are isolated from their family. If they are working in some other country, they might be isolated from their family. They cannot go back, visit their family. So there are kind of a situation, a depression can develop. If you see in this particular time of COVID-19, the cases which has been reported on depression, associated with isolation stress is very high, right? So the clinical psychologists are working hard to have some telephonic communication with them, counseling them to make them okay. So this is also happening. This is all the epigenetic changes, which is as a result of an environmental change. Similarly, if you isolate the rat and put it in a separate cabin like this, I'm so lonely. See here, this rat. So here, other rats are having a social behavior together. They are playing together in the particular cage. So that is also shown. So in the animal studies, it's very extensively done. You will see hundreds of literatures on this. What are the brain areas which are having this influence? One is the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in the decision-making and social behavior. And humans, isolation stress have shown that it reduces the brain volumes in the prefrontal cortex. Then rodents, also, they have shown that there is a dysregulation of the signaling which is happening in the prefrontal cortex. So ultimately, it can also affect the cognitive behavior, the decision-making skills and everything. Hippocampus, in humans and in isolated rodents, they have seen that the volume has been reduced. In humans, of course, it is the imaging studies which will give you a clear idea about the hippocampal volume, whereas in the animal studies, the dissection and you can dissect out the hippocampus and do a study on that. And also low BDNF, the brain-derived neurotropic factors. So all these things are some of the influence which is seen as a result of the isolation stress also. And amygdala one structure which is very important for the emotional behavior of the individual. So here also they have seen that there is a reduction in the volume of the amygdala. This was one study which we had published in like 2 years ago, along with my research guide, Dr. Satish Naik. So here what we did is, this was animals were stressed, rats were stressed for 21 days using the technique of restrained stress. The animals will be put in restrainers and they'll be stressed. So 21 days, they are under severe stress. After that, we did some behavioral studies. We tested some short-term memories in them. We found that the animals, after 21 days of extensive stress, it is like 6 hours every day, 6 hours too, and that 6 hours stress will be continued for 21 days. What will happen is the hippocampal neurons started damaging, right? So in the behavioral changes, what you see in these rodents, they were remarkable. They were very dumb. In all, most of the behavioral tests, whatever we did, they were very poor in their performance. But what we did is, one group of animals, we kept it in an enriched environment with a similar setup what Dr. Marian Diamond was doing, in a huge environment where they can have opportunity to play around, running wheels, everything was there in that. So that kind of setup, we found that it was very much improved, right? So it was a good study which shows that nurture has a very good impact on the thing. So this could have worked in the epigenetic way, but we have not done any epigenetic studies. But definitely this paper was cited by a few authors later. So they were also working on the epigenetic studies. I just wanted to share this because the environment in which you are growing, which you are present, this makes a lot of impact on your behavior. Even if you look at some of the clinical studies, there are so many things which is getting published nowadays. You can see one of the journal articles which was published in Journal of Disability and Rehabilitation. An enriched environment increases the activity in stroke patients undergoing rehabilitation. So here, what they did is, a group of patients who were recovering from the stroke. And here, the extent of stroke also matters. Here they didn't use like serious patients. Some patients, they will be grading the level of strokes, and according to that, they divided a normal group and the one which was not receiving the enriched environment. They were also having stroke. The one which is with enriched environment. How this enriched environment is possible? In the hospital setup, sometimes soft music. In that particular room, soft music were played. The individuals, their relatives used to come and visit, talk to them for quite some time. There is a social interaction with them. So all these things, and the diet, everyone, it was the same diet, but all the external things, what they were receiving as an enrichment, this study, it showed that it improved their recovery rates. This was one small study. It was not with so many samples. I think around 36 or 37 samples were used in each groups. But if you do a huge study, probably they conclude saying that it is the nurturing is also a very important factor for the recovery of the individual. And also the question is environmental enrichment ready for clinical application in human post-stroke rehabilitation? But the problem is, I'm not recommending that this should be done, but I just wanted to highlight that the nurturing also matters in the case of recovery. Now, they say that in the humans, it is very difficult in terms of standardizing this procedure. For example, in the case of animals, we can tell that if you put the running wheel, if you put the music, there are so many influences. It's a multifactorial thing, right? It is not only one influence. Probably it is running, so exercise is happening. There are specific factors, biomolecules like endorphins are released during the exercise. That is one factor, physical exercise. Then when these individuals are interacting, in the rats, when they are socially interacting, that will have an impact. Music, that has an impact. But in the clinical setup, it is very difficult to put it in the right way or to develop a methodology to how the enrichment can be given. But the concept can be used, worked on it, and then each individuals can work on it. And definitely, maybe in the near future, we might start hearing that this kind of enriched environment also will be used along with the clinical therapeutics. Many articles are published like this, especially working on stroke patients. But I can tell you, in the rodent models, it is very easy to do because there are so many studies, even epileptic rats, when they put in enriched environment, they will be recovered. The rats, the brain, the recovery rates and the human brain recovery rates is different. Right? They recover very fast in case of rodents. So these things are just, I want to put this concept together in the clinical settings also. So nurturing can influence the gene and modify your behavior, right? So it is not only, so stop blaming on our genes. Let us always think that the choices what we make